Hi, my name is Sarah Hancock with Serendipity Health. I'm a busy mom, wife, and a pediatric occupational therapist. I'm passionate about helping myself and others get healthy. Subscribe to my channel for ketogenic and healthy living tips and recipes. If you've been reading up on the keto diet, you have probably stumbled across the term macros. And you may not even know what all the fuss is about or what a macro is. And I think that's one of the first important starts to starting keto is knowing what a macro is and exactly what that means. So let me clarify. The term macros stands for macronutrients in the context of nutrition and the keto diet. And those macronutrients are the energy-giving components of our food, and those are the things that fuel our body. So the three biggie macronutrients that we look at are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And these are macronutrients that you're going to focus on if you're beginning a keto diet. And this is where your dietary calories are going to come from. So grasping that concept of macros is important for the keto diet because you have to have the right balance of carbs and proteins and fat to get you into ketosis and to reach your goals on the keto diet. So you have to stay at these certain levels to get into ketosis, to stay into ketosis, and to make your body turn into a fat burning machine. So the first, one of the probably most important macros that you're going to be looking at in terms of the keto diet are carbohydrates. So you'll hear people say your body has to have carbohydrates to survive, and that is not true. Carbohydrates are the only macronutrients that's not essential for survival. And carbs are made up of sugars and starches. And in today's standard American diet, most of the foods that most of us are eating are very high in carbohydrates. If you're new to this and you're just starting to look at labels and start looking at foods and start looking at what you're eating, you will probably be very surprised at the amount of carbs that you're actually taking in any given day. Now, the second part of looking at carbs, usually when you're doing a keto diet, you're going to have your carbs under 15 to 20 net grams of carbs per day. So that's pretty restrictive, right? And so how do you figure out what a net carb is? When you're looking at different foods, you'll look at the labels, you'll see what the content of those foods are. And fiber is actually considered a carb, but because we don't really digest it and it doesn't have any impact on the insulin or our blood sugar levels, you can actually subtract fiber. So if you hear people talking about total carbs or net carbs, the net carb is when you take the total carbs and you subtract the fiber from it. So a lot of foods will have, say there are 10 grams of carbs, but there are 6 grams of fiber in that. You're going to take the 10 grams minus the 6 grams. It's going to give you 4 total net carbs. A lot of foods, if you're eating keto, you're going to want to be eating a lot of vegetables, above ground leafy green vegetables as your source for a lot of your carbohydrates. A lot of those vegetables also have some fiber content that you can subtract to make those really low net carb food choices for you. Even some of the packaged products, the things like the Atkins products, they have a lot of fiber in those so that you can subtract those and get a low grams per carb on some of those type of foods. Some people, when you go keto, they recommend tracking those total carbs, and that's probably a little bit more accurate. A lot of people go for those net carbs because when you can subtract that fiber, it makes it a little bit easier to stay within those confines, staying with your keto carbs. So when you're starting keto and you know that your goal is to limit your carbs, in order to do that successfully, you're going to have to identify what foods are low in carbohydrates and which foods that you need to avoid because they're high in carbohydrates. You're going to have to start checking nutrition labels. And I recommend when you're getting started, you do some research into low carb food lists Pinterest is a great resource, but you can find a lot of solid keto meal plans to give you ideas of what foods you need to eat. Some things are surprising. There are carbs hidden in a lot of our foods that are packaged for convenience. For example, cheese is really common on the keto diet. And initially when I started, I didn't even think about this, but if you buy cheese that's already shredded in the bag, which I do because that saves time and it's easy, they actually add a starch to those cheese products that are already shredded to keep them from sticking together in the package. So those cheeses that are already shredded will have carbs in them, even though cheese itself is a low or no carb food. So you always have to be checking your labels because there are carbs everywhere. When you go to the grocery store, it's just crazy that you have to, when you're starting out, you initially have to just become really conscientious of the carbs and what you can and can't eat to be within the confines of staying in a low carb diet. So the next macronutrient we're going to look at when we're tracking macros is protein. So protein is really important for growth, for tissue repair, for immune function. Those proteins are basically those building blocks for your body. So for a ketogenic diet, protein is another one that you're going to want to track because you have to have enough protein in your diet that you're preserving your lean muscle mass. So you don't want to lose muscle, you want to just lose the fat when you're eating keto. So you want to preserve your body mass, but then you also don't want to eat too much protein because if you go way over on your protein, that can also affect ketosis and your body can convert and store some of those proteins. So you want to make sure you're at the right level for protein that you're taking in to fit your specific macronutrients. And then the third and final macronutrient that we're going to talk about with keto is fats. So you have to have an adequate amount of fat in your diet for energy, growth, for absorbing nutrients from your food, and not to mention that the fats will help us stay full and add flavor to our food. So with your fat, how much fat do you actually need when you're eating keto? If you're keeping your carbs to a minimum and you're eating the right amount of protein to preserve your muscle mass, the rest of those dietary requirements for you are going to be met with fat. And then this is where there's that individual component to it that depends on your goals. If your goal is to maintain your weight or to gain mass, then you're going to want to have a different amount of fat and calories to meet your personal health goals. If your goal is weight loss, then you're going to want to make sure you're at a calorie deficit and that fat is a little bit lower so that you're burning the fat that's already stored in your body. So when you're looking at the macros, now we've identified what those main basic 3 macros are we're going to look at with keto: carbohydrates, protein, fat. We have to talk about how to calculate them. Now, some people, when they go to keto, there's all different kinds of philosophies out there. Some people just say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to watch my carbs. I'm going to make sure I'm staying under 20 grams a day of net carbs, and I'm just going to do just that. And some people have really good results with that. I personally feel like it's important to calculate your personal macros and get numbers that are individualized to you and your goals. Sometimes I have come across people who are just like tracking just their carbs, but then because they're eating higher fat, they're still having 3,000 calories a day but wanting to lose weight. So you have to make sure that what you're eating is in line with your long-term goals. So I recommend that when people are starting out new, that you calculate your macros and you know exactly what your goals are so that you have the best chances of being successful with hitting your goals if you know what your goals are and you're tracking them. Now, everybody is different, and some people it's too much for them, but I recommend that you go to a keto calculator. And this is where you can go online. There's my favorite one is ruled.me, and there's another one that is ketogains.com. You can go on the internet and just search for a keto calculator. You can do all these mathematical calculations manually if that's your thing. I like to just plug my stuff into the computer and it tells me what I need to do. So if you go to a keto calculator online, you can put in your personal information. It's going to ask you your height, your weight, your age, your activity level, your body fat. It's going to look at exactly who you are as a profile, and then it's going to ask you what your goals are. Do you want to preserve muscle? Do you want to lose weight? Do you want to just focus on the health aspects? And it's going to give you custom macro and calorie numbers just for you and your goals. So I recommend that people get this information just because it's going to make sure that you know that you're working towards your goals. Because there's nothing more frustrating than doing work and cutting carbs out of your diet and really changing what you're doing and not getting the results that you want. So, to go back to the beginning, if somebody tells you, I think you need to track your macros, what they're actually telling you to do is the following. Number 1, identify your health goals. Are you interested in losing fat, building muscle? Are you simply wanting to just get into ketosis so that you can get some of those extra health benefits that come from that? Know what your goals are. Write them down. That helps you keep accountable for your goals. And then number 2, you're going to have to determine the calories, carbs, protein, and fat that you're going to need to eat to get into ketosis and stay in ketosis and therefore meet your health goals. I recommend a keto calculator as the fastest and easiest way to do this. Number 3, you're going to want to start calculating the macronutrient profile of the foods that you're already eating. You're going to start checking the labels on the packages. You're going to start tracking your foods in some type of tracking system, whether that's an app or pencil and paper. You need to know exactly what it is that you're eating until you learn what you can eat to stay on target with your goals. And then fourth, I recommend that people create a meal plan based around the foods that you know you like or that you've previously identified and you want to stick with them because they work for you. And I think that that sets people up for success, because if you create a meal plan and you say, I know I need these things, I know these things are staying within my macros, it makes it really easy to know what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat it, and that you're going to be on track with your goals. And I know that's difficult for some people, but I really believe that that quote by Benjamin Franklin that says, if you fail to plan, that you are planning to fail. Planning ahead is important with this. And you know, I know some people come to keto when it's new and they say, oh my gosh, this is too much, too overwhelming. For me personally, I have been doing keto long enough. I have learned, I can tell the signs in my body when I'm in ketosis. I've learned what type of foods I can eat with a day to stay right around my macros where I need to be hitting them. So this is just what I recommend for people starting out. You don't have to do it forever, but once you learn what your goals are and what a day looks like that's hitting your macros with the amount of foods and calories, you learn what you can eat and what you can fill in those holes. But I recommend people starting out this way because I think starting out with all of the best information gives people the greatest chance of being successful with their goals, which is what you always want to see.